Okay, we're about almost 5 minutes now past the hour. So Cynthia, if you want to take control, go
Great.
right ahead.
Thanks, Eric. So welcome, everyone. We're very excited about the webinar we have for you today. We are going to be introducing our latest booster pack, Automate Cloud Orchestration with Kubernetes. So welcome, everyone. A few things before we get going. My name is Cynthia Emerson, and I am the DAIR Program Manager. Also joining me from Canary today is Tom Vitez, our Senior Director of Applications. Don McCullough, our DAIR architect, who most of you are familiar with from our Slack channel. Eric Bitmanis, who is full on with our DAIR team now as our business development specialist, so look for his name on some of your follow-up emails. And Hervé Guy, our manager of analytics, who is joining us as our French translator for those of you who'd like to ask a question in French. So welcome, and as I said, thank you for attending. This is one in a continuing series we host for our DAIR community. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available online, and we will also be making a PDF version available of the presentation. If you have a question you'd like to ask during the presentation, please just go to the participant menu in Zoom and raise your hand, and we will unmute you. And we're also going to provide time at the end for Q&A that you can ask Sachin some of your questions. So with that, Hervé.
Bonjour, bienvenue, merci à tous de participer au webinaire de la TIR. Aujourd'hui, ce webinaire est l'une des séries de webinaires que nous organisons à tous les trimestres. Ce webinaire est présentement enregistré et il sera disponible en ligne. Nous mettrons également à la disposition des participants une version PDF en ligne de la présentation d'aujourd'hui. Donc, si par hasard vous avez une question et que vous aimeriez poser pendant la présentation, veuillez vous rendre dans le menu de participants de Zoom et lever la main et nous activerons votre audio. Finalement, nous tiendrons aussi une séance de questions-réponses à la fin de la présentation où vous pourrez l'utiliser la fonction message, questions-réponses ou Q&A du menu Zoom pour écrire vos questions. Voilà.
Wonderful. Thank you, Hervé. Merci. Next slide, Eric. So our agenda today is welcome, which we have now done. A couple of quick little updates on my side, and then we are going to turn it over to introduce you to our newest DAIR booster pack. We'll leave time at the end for questions and then a few closing thoughts on an update on our next meeting. Eric. Next slide, sorry. So we touched on this in our last one, but it is still something I want to bring to everyone's attention. For those of you who didn't attend our last webinar, is that we are really actively out in our community now and working with several accelerators and incubators in the community. I see we have Senjen, as we said earlier, joining us. Thank you. And with that, we're also putting together a guest speaker program for DAIR and our partners in the community. So if you have an incubator you're working with, an accelerator, or an opportunity where you think we could partner with you for an opportunity to talk about what we do or showcase our participants in you, please reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you about that. We have Slack polling that we've launched in our channel as well. And our latest question is, just tell us what technologies, we're speaking about booster packs here today, so what technologies would you like to see us focus our booster pack catalog on? Like, we are actively building out that catalog, and we'd really love it if you could just take 2 minutes, not even, seriously, 1 minute at the end of the presentation today. I posted it back in the channel yesterday, and just let us know which ones of those technologies interest you. And we've also provided a spot that if you have a new idea, by all means, please let us know. And as I said, the main show today is talking about our latest one with cloud orchestration with Kubernetes, which we are delighted to say was developed for us by BigBitBus, their participant and graduate. Next slide, Eric. And just a reminder for those of you who may not have heard me speak about the Booster Pack program from a builder perspective, we do go and call on our Canadian businesses, our small and medium-sized businesses, to build these packages for us. lots of opportunities. If you have an idea and you're accepted to develop one for us, it provides a ton of opportunity for new partners, resources, and promotion. We do our best to not only speak in this forum, but we have been working with Sachin with other partners in the community to promote the work he's been doing for us. And we do pay. There is a $50,000 revenue opportunity. It is a fixed rate contract, but we do compensate our builders for their time and effort. So if you are interested, reach out to me for if you have any questions, or check out our expression of interest and details about what it means to be a builder online. Next slide, Eric. So without further ado, next slide. Sachin. So Sachin, I met Sachin in my early days here. As I said, he'd been a graduate of our program, but he is also the founder of BigBitBus, a company that, is operating out of the Waterloo area. Sachin has a PhD in computer engineering from Boston University and has co-authored over 40 peer-reviewed international conference and journal research papers and holds 8 patents in the US and European Union. He's also a CNCF Linux Foundation certified Kubernetes administrator and a Google Cloud Platform certified data engineer. He routinely consults for small and large businesses in the cloud computing community, big data technology, cloud native, and Kubernetes. He has 15 years experience in R&D, has worked with many startups in our community in Canada, US, and in Germany. So we are thrilled to have Sachin here today unveiling our latest booster pack. And with that, over to you, Sachin.
Well, thank you, Cynthia. Let me start with sharing my screen, I guess. So let me share my desktop here. And are you able to see my screen?
We are.
All right, excellent. So, so thanks for joining the webinar and that great introduction. So our theme today is this new booster pack that is being released today. And it is all about automating cloud orchestration with Kubernetes. And we did this as part of the DAIR BoosterPack program. And in fact, this is now online. And we are looking forward to having all users try it out. If you have questions, come back to us and generally have a good time trying out Kubernetes on your own. So I have a few slides, and then we'll look at what this booster pack actually does through a demo. So let's get started. So introductions, I think Cynthia already introduced us. So we're BigBitBus, and that's me. This is about a 3-year-old startup out of Waterloo. And if you need to reach me, you can look here at my LinkedIn handle as well as the email. And we also, of course, you can reach our website and learn more about us. So the agenda as far as this presentation is concerned. So first, we'll just have like a 1-slide overview of what this booster pack contains, right? The TLDR, the too long didn't read sort of slide. Then we'll just motivate a little around, what containers are and why they're useful, and what's this whole talk around Kubernetes and how it can help you. Of course, Kubernetes is great, and it's probably the most active open source project out there. But there are complexities in it, and it's a steep learning curve. So we'll just look at what was the problem statement, or what is the question this booster pack is trying to solve for users of Kubernetes. And finally, we'll do this booster pack walkthrough and demo, where I'll be showing you everything that we've put online, and also demoing how this thing works within the DAIR cloud. All right, so let's get going. All right, so this is a TLDR slide. All right, so what is the booster pack? So it's an end-to-end example of deploying a web application on Kubernetes using the DAIR cloud and a virtual machine on it. So what this means is that in our day jobs, we often apply our coding expertise to develop a web application. And once we have this web application, we want to run it on a server, right? And Kubernetes helps you run your applications within it, so that you can then put it into production and share it with users and so on and so forth. So we're going to be showing you an example of how this is done in Kubernetes. All right. So the key of this booster pack is that there's an end-to-end example here. So it's not like you will be learning Kubernetes in little bits, gleaned from, say, one blog at one website and another Stack Overflow post and some documentation. So what we've done is we've taken the whole process and put it inside the booster pack. So what we've got is a very simple web application, a to-do list, and then we've got Kubernetes running this application, as well as many supporting services which would probably be needed in a production scenario. So you can see how the whole deal comes together in one place. All right. And what it will help you do is learn a lot of the best practices and get productive fast with Kubernetes, rather than trying to find your way around and chasing down red herrings or being suboptimal with your time. And that hopefully will also help you avoid some common pitfalls. We've also done a lot of research around how things should be set up. So we are providing some curated links to high quality documentation, which is out there. And all the code is open source and it's free to use as you choose. So, you can take bits and pieces of the code and apply it to your own use case, or, just learn from it, things like that. And of course, the whole setup runs within the DAIR cloud. So it's a free resource. So you don't have to worry about a bill as you're trying to learn or stand up Kubernetes in your own environment. And here's the link to the booster pack. We'll be going over this, but this is basically the one slide kind of view of what the whole booster pack is. All right. So before we actually get into the specifics of the booster pack, let's just try to understand why this containerization is so hot and why it matters so much to application development. So, in the past 20 years or so, we've gone from bare metal servers running applications where you actually bought a physical server and you imaged it with your operating system and then had someone install your application on it and then run this. From there, we went to virtual machines, which allow you to do some infrastructure as code and also have some efficient usage of your hardware resources. And now to containers, which are much lighter in their footprint as compared to virtual machines, and so very efficient. And at the same time, containers have this very important property that the images that are running within the container are immutable, which means that what a developer develops on his or her laptop is what is going to be deployed in production. And this has huge ramifications for improving the DevOps workflow and reducing the toil and the manual interventions that have to be done to, say, keep up a bare metal or a virtual machine as compared to containers. So hopefully, some of you might be aware of Docker containers, and that's been probably the biggest driver for this widespread adoption of containers. But Docker containers are somewhat limited in that, they were, the original use case was for just one single machine that was maybe your development PC. And then came along Kubernetes, and Kubernetes is a container orchestrator. So Kubernetes is this open source platform for managing whole containerized workloads and services. So think hundreds of thousands of containers of different types of microservices of your architecture, some that you build, some that you can get ready-made through the community, and you run all these, and Kubernetes schedules them in a very intelligent fashion. And the best thing is that almost all of this work can be done through automation and infrastructure as code, right? So you no longer have these kind of snowflakes of this individual sysadmin who goes in and manually does something on a virtual machine or a bare metal server, right? So the developer is empowered to deploy their application as well. So because everything is code, and developers have full control over what they can do in Kubernetes if they have the access to the cluster. So what does Kubernetes help us with, right? So let's look at this picture. So in the middle, let's say this is your application that you've written up. And Kubernetes provides a whole lot of sort of supports around your application to make this something that can be run in production. So from what you developed on your laptop, which was just the core of the application, to something you can actually run and scale in production, right? Things like providing storage, or providing ways of controlling traffic in and out of your application, or dividing up your application into logical segments through namespaces, maintaining state and configuration and secrets, helping with operational issues such as deployments and releases, uh, say rolling back a release if there's a regression, things like that, helping you with monitoring your applications, auto scaling as traffic goes up or down, providing access control, fine-grained access control, as well as resource limits, so that if one part of your application, say, has a memory leak, it doesn't bring down the entire cluster with it. So these are some of the services which Kubernetes provides. And in addition, there's a whole big vendor ecosystem which is helping drive a lot of integrations of Kubernetes to your application, right? So a lot of value, business value, is created when Kubernetes and the application are configured to work together, okay? And that's the reason why this is so popular in today's world. Now, it sounds really great, but the question is, how do you unlock that business value of Kubernetes? How do you configure your application to work well with Kubernetes and make sure you don't get overwhelmed with the complexity and the many features and ways of configuring the system, right? And that's basically the problem statement of this BoosterPack, right? So we can all get access to some sort of Kubernetes cluster. You can buy it through a public cloud provider. You can set it up on your laptop, or there are also some serverless Kubernetes sort of systems out there. So the bar to entry is really low, but then once you get in, how are you going to get business value, and how are you going to get productive fast? That's what this BoosterPack is trying to address, okay? So that was just sort of an introduction into what the background is. Now let's do a walkthrough of the BoosterPack itself, and then let's see a demo and go from there, all right? So I'm going to exit the presentation. And I'm going to go to the DAIR BoosterPack catalog, which is boosterpacks.cloud.canary.ca. And within here, you can see there are many booster packs now. And here is the automate cloud orchestration with Kubernetes. So you can click on the flight plan here. All right. And if you look at some of the text here, there's a lot of information here. So let me try to explain it in some condensed format. So we're looking at the flight plan, which is kind of an overview of this booster pack. Okay. And what this has is we start with an overview of, sort of building up the business case for why Kubernetes matters and why you should consider having this as part of your IT infrastructure. So this is kind of like if you're trying to convince yourself or your boss about why we should deploy our application in Kubernetes, maybe you'll get some ideas here. And then if you scroll down, there is a sort of a synopsis of what's contained in the booster pack. So let me speak about this at a high level. So what the booster pack will do is that it will create a virtual machine in the DAIR cloud running either on AWS or Azure. And then it will install a single node Kubernetes cluster. I mean, it's a single node cluster on that virtual machine. And then we've written a web application, which is has a single page front end written in Vue.js JavaScript, and a back end written in Django API. And this is a to-do application, the simplest application you can dream of. So this application code is then deployed into the Kubernetes cluster, all right? And along with just the code for the application logic, we also provide the Kubernetes infrastructure as code to actually deploy this within Kubernetes, all right? So that's the Helm charts that we have for the Vue.js and the Django REST framework application. In addition, we use some developer tools. Particularly, there's a tool from Google called Scaffold, which is used for creating these container images and controlling the Kubernetes deployment through the Helm charts, which we demonstrate in the booster pack. As well as we provide some operational elements, such as a Kubernetes dashboard, which gives you a GUI browser-based view of what's happening in your Kubernetes cluster. A monitoring stack based on Prometheus and Grafana, which are the standard cloud-native monitoring stacks out there. And so we set up all this, and then we install an Nginx ingress, which allows us to route traffic from anywhere in the world into the cluster. So these could be like requests coming from your browser to your to-do list, right? And we show how all that works. And then, just within the code base, you'll find many examples of how to manage application secrets, configuration, resource limits, auto scaling, stuff like that. And of course, so there's a lot of code that is in the GitHub repository. But we also provide a whole lot of documentation and context into what's going on in this code so that you can learn from those examples and apply that to your own application. So if I keep going, we've already seen this picture in the slides. So some of the resources that we've collected here, first and foremost is a GitHub repository where all the code lives. And that is routinely updated, so you can always check newer versions of the code related to this booster pack out there. Then we've provided links to some of the common tools we've used. We've used Helm, which is like a package manager for Kubernetes, Prometheus and Grafana. Then we've used a micro-K8s to actually install the Kubernetes cluster in the DAIR virtual machine. And I already mentioned Scaffold, which is this Google provided tool for providing standard workflows for building, pushing, and deploying an application. Now, if you're completely new to Kubernetes, we've got you covered. So all the code is a great learning resource as well. But if you want to go through a tutorial, you could look at the official tutorials from Kubernetes. These are really good because in addition to just documentation, they also provide like a live lab where you can safely play with Kubernetes in your own free time, as well as tutorials for Helm, the package manager for Kubernetes, all right? So there's a lot of documentation in the BoosterPack, which we will look at more in detail later in this presentation. But also there is documentation within the code base itself. And these are some links to documentation pertaining to the basics of the whole application and how Kubernetes functions, the API, the Django API itself, the Vue.js front end, monitoring, as well as instructions if you just want to install this locally on your PC. Now, if you get into trouble, that is, you get stuck, and I assure you, you will get stuck because Kubernetes is not easy. You can always reach out to the DAIR Slack channel or email dair.admin@canary.ca, as well as if you find a bug or a regression, you can always open an issue in the GitHub repository. Here are some best practices. I won't go into them. Please read them when you have some time to digest some of this information. But the one thing I would like to point out is we do have a section in the detailed documentation around what this booster pack is not, which will help you understand the limitations of how far this booster pack will take you in your Kubernetes journey, and then where you need to then build upon these basics to make it more enterprise ready and to actually deploy everything in production. And finally, there's some tips and traps. Again, good reading material. I highly encourage you to read it when you have time. So that's like an overview of the booster pack. Now let's click on the sample solution, which is a more detailed view of what's inside and everything that makes up this booster pack. So within the sample solution, we have this picture which I would actually draw your attention to. This is the overview diagram. And it's a little small here, so let me just go back to my slides where I had a copy of the same diagram. And all right. Oh, so this is the sample solution, all right, which will help you visualize what the booster pack will set up for you within that virtual machine. So you as a developer, or say your development team, is creating the, say, the application, the web application that you're deploying within your infrastructure. So you've written up the code, JavaScript, Python, whatever. And this white rectangle out here is just one piece of what you need to get everything going in production and operationalizing it, all right? So as a developer, you keep iterating and writing your code, and then when you're ready to push it into production, you use Scaffold to actually create an image for you. And that image is stored in a container registry, such as a Docker registry. And then What Scaffold does for you is that it connects into your Kubernetes cluster. So all this stuff in the bigger rectangle is the the DAIR Cloud VM running micro KTS, right? It connects into the Kubernetes cluster, and it uses Helm to deploy that application, which means pull down the container image from here and run that within Kubernetes, schedule it properly, have replicas, and do a whole lot of other work, which you can, which we won't get into right here. So that actually creates this service for, say, the Django API as well as the front end, right? And in addition, there's also a supporting service for monitoring, which is being set up. So this is, again, another Helm chart, but this is not a Helm chart that you've written. You're taking this from the Prometheus community, the experts who've written the Prometheus and Grafana servers, and deploying that Helm chart within Kubernetes. In addition, you're deploying yet another Helm chart for the Kubernetes GUI dashboard, which allows you to have some observability within what's going on in your Kubernetes cluster. So all these components are put in, and then what we're also doing is installing the Nginx ingress resource, right? And so clients request, when they come into Nginx, they get routed to the appropriate backend based on layer 7 routing, essentially looking at the URLs and seeing where the request should go. So this is a view of what the sample solution will set up for you. Okay, so let's go back to the documentation here. And again, this is just in what I just described about the various components. And finally, let's go to a technology demonstration. So for this, I have yet another picture. Let me make this big. So what we're going to do is, we're going to use this BoosterPack to set up this virtual machine in the DAIR cloud. And once it's set up, we want to connect to it so that we can play around with that to-do list and look at the monitoring and the Grafana and all that stuff, right? So in real life, what would happen is that you would go and install a TLS certificate to get SSL connectivity into your cluster, right? And you would install it at that Nginx layer so that you can terminate the SSL connection there. However, here, since we don't have a DNS host name for this virtual machine in DAIR, we are just going to connect through an SSH tunnel, all right? Which means that from my local PC, I'm going to connect, create an SSH tunnel into my DAIR machine so that it's completely secure. And then we're going to use the browser on my local host on my PC to browse all these components, all right? And in here, actually, if you look at this this circle here, this is the Kubernetes cluster within the virtual machine. You can see that this L7 routing, where Nginx ingress is sending off requests to various endpoints, depending on what that endpoint is. So like /Django API goes to Django here, /frontend goes to the Vue.js, and so on and so forth. And what's also interesting here is that you can see that some of the services are user-facing, the ones which are attached to this L7 routing. But there are some services which are completely internal. So Grafana is the front end for monitoring, but all the data is stored in Prometheus, and that's not user-facing in this case. Or for that matter, there's a Postgres service which holds all those to-dos that you insert into the application, but that's not exposed to the user. So you can do a whole lot of service architecting by if you know your way around Kubernetes and how you want this whole application environment to look. And that's actually the power of Kubernetes, where this whole everything in this blue circle can be created by the developer themselves. They don't need to go to a firewall team or a database team or a storage team to get all these components provisioned. They can do everything in code, and that's why people find Kubernetes so exciting. All right, so we know what we're going to do. So let's go and try it out. So to start with, what I'm going to do is I am going to create a tunnel. All right. Actually, I just created, but let me show you how I'm going to create that SSH tunnel so that from my local PC here, I'm able to connect into that DAIR machine. Okay. So this is an SSH command. And what it's doing is it's taking my private key and it's connecting. It's saying my localhost 8080 should be connected to localhost 80 on the remote on the DAIR machine. All right. So I do that, and it connects me. So there is now a tunnel as well as a shell that I have to that test instance, which is running in the DAIR cloud. Okay. So this IP address, where did I get the IP address from? Let me just quickly show you. Okay, let's see. Oh, okay. I need to log in, but it's basically coming from the Morpheus, the Morpheus portal that we have, where you can go in and provision this particular blueprint. And we have instruction on how to do this in the sample solution write-up that we have, right? So in any case, I open the tunnel here, and then if I go here, so these are my to-dos, all right? And this is my front end. So it's being routed to that Vue.js container running in Kubernetes. So let's try to insert one more. And of course, may the demo gods be with me. Don't forget the milk, right? So I inserted another item into my to-do list. And of course, I could remove an item or what have you. Now, of course, this is just the front end. So let's try to find out what's happening in the back end. And I just made that a little smaller so that I can actually look at all my tabs. And what this is so, we have the Django API server, which is actually doing all the work. It's storing these to-dos coming from that Vue.js front end into a Postgres database. So you can see that you can, since this is a browsable API, I can just go to the Django API server and check that we have those same records which are in here showing up as here. So that means our application is working, right? So that's good news. Now, I mentioned earlier that we want some observability to know what's actually happening in the Kubernetes cluster, right? So let's go to the next tab here, which is the Kubernetes dashboard, all right? And I want to log into this dashboard. So how am I going to do that? It's asking me for a token here. So this is one of the credentials that Kubernetes provides to you when you set up the cluster. And fortunately, we can get that from here, from within the VM in which I'm logged in. And this is the token that it is asking me for. So you can also get this from the Morpheus GUI, but I'm showing it to you through the command line right now. And then I click sign in. And I get access to this whole dashboard, which shows all the components that are running within Kubernetes. So for example, let's go and find all the deployments that are running. So we have the Vue.js front end running here in a namespace called FE, for example. we've got the Django Python API running, the dashboard itself. So this, what you're seeing on the screen right now, is running within Kubernetes. Then we have the monitoring stack through Grafana, and a few other components which we can also talk about later. So that's the deployments. And then behind those deployments, we have pods, right? And pods are just another name for containers, although pods can do a little more than containers in Kubernetes. But for the most part, they're just like a Docker container. And if you observe here, we have 2 pods for the Vue.js front end, which means that there are we've got a replica of the front end, so that if one of the pods dies, or if there's too many users, they can actually be load balanced into those 2 pods. And similarly, we have the Django pod and some of the other stuff in here, right? So you can actually go through this and know pretty much everything there is to know about your Kubernetes cluster. Okay. So that tells us that we've got the dashboard going. Now, the other piece was the Grafana. I mean, this is very similar in the sense that it actually lets you, get information about different components of your Kubernetes cluster and so on and so forth. So hang on, I think I need to go to, let's try the etcd. Let me see if you can get any metrics here. Okay, so let's try the API server. Right, so this is, for example, the API server itself, one of the Kubernetes components, and you can see all sorts of usage, memory statistics, all that stuff. And of course, you can instrument this to your own needs by creating new dashboards or editing them or what have you. So if you know something about Grafana, you will easily be able to add your own dashboards and have more observability into the system. Okay. So that tells us what's running. So now let's get a little more geeky, and let's see what's actually in this virtual machine, right? So so this is a Linux virtual machine. It's running Ubuntu 20.04, just the plain image. And within this, what happens is when we provision the blueprint in Morpheus, it installs this Kubernetes Automation Toolkit. And if I do this, let me just install tree so that we quickly can see what's in that directory. Okay. All right. All right. So within this Kubernetes Automation Toolkit, we've got one subdirectory called code. Okay. And the code has app code, and this is the API, the Python code which drives the API, as well as the front end, which is the Vue.js code, which drives the front end. You saw the to-do list. But interestingly, both these API and front end also have a folder called kubecode, right? And within kubecode, so let's just go in there. Code, app code, API. So let's just look at the API. And if I go to kubecode, so what this is a Helm chart, all right? And this is infrastructure as code, which helps scaffold, which is the, that deployment tool, remember? Deploy the Python Django application into Kubernetes, all right? So if we have a look quick, so that's the Helm chart. And if I go here, there is a scaffold.yaml file, right? And here you can see that even the deployment is defined as a YAML file. So it's defined in code, and it says, all right, build a container image and tag it with the commit SHA, the git SHA of whatever version we are on. and then you push it to a a container registry, and then you deploy it using the Helm package manager. And this is the name of the Helm deployment you're going to put into Kubernetes. Put it into a certain namespace so that it's nicely separated from everything else, and use these values files, which are just parameterizing the Helm chart to make it. So here you can specify how many replicas you want and whether you want a certificate, what sort of certificate, all the parameters that you would normally use within your application. So the key of these values files is that you might have a different values file for your dev environment or your staging environment, and a different one for your production environment, so that you can separate the environments out, and all you need to do is to change these values files rather than change the infrastructure as code itself. And that's the key advantage of Helm as compared to doing this some other way in Kubernetes. All right, so so now that we know what's in the code on the API layer, let's see, let's run that tree command again. So we know what's in here, and of course, feel free to navigate through this code. It's all on GitHub, and learn from this. There are also several README files in here which could help you grep it in a better fashion. Then we also have this K8s common code. All right, so if I go to, it's under code. So here we've got essentially, so let's go to the K8s dashboard, for example, right? And if you observe here, we've got a values file, just like we had a values file for our custom Helm chart, but we've not got the Helm chart itself. So where is the Helm chart? The Helm chart's not written by us. We're getting that Helm chart from a curated repository on the internet. So the people, say, who know everything about the Kubernetes dashboard or have created it, they also create the Helm chart for it and publish it. So you just use that Helm chart and then use these values in here to adapt that Helm chart, that deployment of the Kubernetes dashboard into your for your purposes. So you can use a lot of components which others have written for Kubernetes, those experts out there. And that's one of the most powerful things around Kubernetes, that there's such a huge community which are building all these components which you can use like Lego blocks within your own Kubernetes cluster and just adapt them using the values in these values file, right? So that's one of the cool things about Kubernetes. All right, so so we've gone through some of the code here. Within here, there's a whole lot of documentation. All right. So there are a lot of markdown files here. I highly recommend, especially if you're just starting up, or for example, there's one way of running this whole BoosterPack even on your local PC if you don't have access to the DAIR cloud right now. So you can do this using Vagrant. So you can have a look at all this code, which is also available on GitHub. Okay, so let's go back to our browser and the sample solution. And again, below that, below this big blue globe about Kubernetes, there are links to different components within the BoosterPack, as well as the documentation and some explanations around all those components you saw in those subdirectories that I was showing you. So one of the important things about this presentation is what the sample solution is not, right? So we're running it in a single node, and essentially we don't have enterprise level security turned on. It doesn't support multiple users. Of course, Kubernetes is built for multiple users. There's a lot of good role-based access control tools inbuilt into Kubernetes. So you can look at some of these tools through these documentation links we've provided here to go to the next level. We haven't got multi-node considerations set up because we're running it in a single node within the DAIR cloud. So this is something where you could learn more. Actually, you could run a multi-node Kubernetes cluster using the same micro K8s. So there is a there is a link here if you want to try something out crazy with a multi-node Kubernetes setup. And one of the most interesting things about Kubernetes is that because it is being adopted so widely, almost all public cloud providers have custom integrations in their own flavor of Kubernetes, right? So if you go to AWS, there's EKS. Google, there's GKE. I think Azure is AKS. So they've taken Kubernetes and adopted it into their cloud, and they have really great integrations with some of their other infrastructure and platform services there. So if your company is looking to use one of the Kubernetes offerings by these public cloud providers, you should go and read that documentation about your cloud provider's Kubernetes implementation, because that will really simplify your whole setup by a lot. So, all right, so we've seen the demo. Now, how do you deploy this thing? There's a whole lot of instructions here and screenshots. Essentially, we go to Morpheus, and under provisioning apps, you will see, let me make this a little bigger. You will see, the BigBitBus CAD blueprint for AWS or Azure, depending on which cloud you want to install it in. And you just click on that and you follow the instructions. And once you've done that, it basically spins up a virtual machine. It takes about 20 minutes to provision because it's installing a whole lot of stuff over a plain vanilla Ubuntu VM. And you end up with an IP address. And that's the IP address I used in my, in this SSH command. So hang on. So this was this IP address I used right here. Okay. So we do that, and then you should just be able to go to localhost 8080, and these links to /frontend should give you your to-do list, and you can start exploring the whole project with some of the examples and the this video that will also be put up online to help you navigate in the beginning, right? All right, so it has screenshots for everything I've shown you essentially. Termination, well, you can always delete that virtual machine you create in the DAIR cloud, and that'll get rid of that. In addition, this sample solution, describes a lot in a lot of detail around what Scaffold is, what Helm is, Prometheus and Grafana, things like those. And as well as our application, right? Both the Vue.js and the Django application, if you're interested in learning more about that. There are a few security considerations which I highly recommend you read before you put Kubernetes in production. In particular, the TLS security that I mentioned earlier. You might want to learn how to use the things like certificate managers in Kubernetes, which can automate a lot of this process of getting a certificate or renewing it and stuff like that. So there's a lot of good documentation you can read about this here. These are the endpoints that we use for the demo. And then we talk about scaling. So, like I mentioned, we have these values files that we are passing into the Helm chart. And those have these particular places where you can specify how auto scaling works. There are some availability and cost considerations that you might want to look into. There are some good cost calculators from Google, Amazon, Azure about how their Kubernetes is priced. And yes, finally, there's some licensing considerations. So all the code here is under an Apache 2 license, so you can use it as you so wish. And yes, I think that brings me to the end of my presentation.
Great.
I'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Sachin. Does anyone have a question? If you do, just pop it into the chat box for us. I think that means you did such a great job explaining it all that you've answered all the questions. So,
Oh, there will be questions
yes, well,
eventually.
that's exactly it. So I was just going to say, most of you, and if you're not on our Slack channel already, you can certainly reach out to us. Hold on, we do have a question. I'm doing your job for you, Eric. Sorry about that. Is it different running in Canary versus AWS?
Aha. Is it different running in? Well, so one of the reasons people love Kubernetes is because it provides that layer of abstraction, right? So all the code that you would write, for example, we've written this to-do application, right? In the BoosterPack, it will pretty much run without any change on any Kubernetes cluster in any cloud provider. So if you start developing Kubernetes, this will also be one of your biggest advantages that you're cloud agnostic.
Okay. Does anyone else have?
I've got another one that came in here.
Okay, great.
He's wondering about talking about node. Is this similar to a single instance versus multiple nodes on multiple instances?
Multiple instances. So let me show you something here. Let's log into our virtual machine and
just while you're doing that, Sachin, I know we are at 3 o'clock, so if anyone does need to drop off and has any other questions, please drop into our Slack channel or just forward them to us by email, but we'll continue on for any questions for those who can stay on the line. Sorry, Sachin, go ahead.
Right. So there is no difference as far as your experience is concerned when you deploy it into the Kubernetes cluster and there's only one node here as compared to multiple nodes, because the whole scheduling of the pods is done by Kubernetes, right? So as long as there is resource available, it will try to spread it out on different nodes if they are available. Otherwise, it will just put it on the same node as long as there's resource available. So nothing changes at that level, right? For a single node versus multi-node. Of course, you'll run out of resources very quickly if you run too many of these pods, and then Kubernetes will not be able to provision your stuff on a single node.
Perfect. Thank you, Sachin. I do have a couple more coming in from Sanjay. He's wondering if we can give a URL for the Slack. So Sanjay, I will get that for you, or Cynthia will get that for you as well. The other big question for you, Sachin, is can you deploy a EKS cluster inside the DAIR cloud?
I don't think so, but maybe Dawn is the correct person to know if people have access to non VM resources through the DAIR cloud.
Yes, we are going to be doing a technical webinar in the very near future on Kubernetes clusters in the DAIR cloud. There is a presentation that is up on our YouTube channel that covers Docker so far. There is EKS deployment capabilities within DAIR, as well as AKS in Azure at the moment. But both of those I have not written detailed instructions for at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Dawn. Is there any other questions that anyone has? You can just put it right in the chat panel or in the Q&A panel.
Just a last thing then. Oh, there is one more question, but I'll just finish this point. If you do want to reach out to Sachin directly with regards to the booster pack, he is also in the Slack channel, and you can, for any of the questions specific to his booster pack, please feel free to reach out to him directly as well. I think another question's come in, Eric.
Sure.
Yeah, it has. So Steven's wondering, how do you scale up automatically? Kubernetes can do that, I hear.
Right. So there are different types of scaling. So if you're referring to pod auto scaling or containers auto scaling, so we have an example in this booster pack. I could quickly show it to you, perhaps. If I go to the CAD booster pack and if you go to code, app code. However, if you're talking about scaling up more nodes, right? Instead of a single node, I want like suddenly to have 20 nodes. Then there is a node auto scaling as well, but that's usually provided by the cloud provider. So for example, if you're using EKS on Amazon, you can set up an auto scaling node pool, sort of a construct, and then it'll scale up the number of nodes as, say, the CPU utilization on your nodes goes high, right? But within each deployment, so for example, here, if I go to, let me check if I have this set up here. So, so this is the values file for my Django API, right? It says replica count of 2. And I have this little YAML blurb right here, which says I've enabled auto scaling with a minimum replica of 1 and a max replica of 20. And when does it start scaling up? If it finds that these target CPU utilization percentage is above 80% on all the pods or the containers running my API server, it will spin up some more containers. Likewise, if the memory utilization is over 80, then it will do the same thing. So that's the HPA, or the horizontal pod auto scaling. All right.
Perfect. So Stephen thinks that's perfectly easy and cool. So thank you so much for answering that, Sachin.
Right.
I'm not seeing any other questions right now in the chat or in the QA panel. So I will share my screen again just to finish off the presentation here. If Cynthia, you have any closing thoughts?
Right. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Sachin. That's terrific. And we are, as I said, super excited to add this to our booster pack catalog. And thank you all for attending today. As always, feel free to reach out to us. And the other last parting comment I guess I have is we did mention we're bringing you more technical webinars, but we're also looking to bring you more webinars on general interest topics. So if there are things you'd like to see us do, people you'd like us to bring in, guest speakers, please drop me a quick line and tell me what you'd like to see, and we'll do our best to bring it to you. So thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Right. Thank you.